In the quiet corners of crowded rooms, there are those whose presence is felt more in absence than in voice. They carry the weight of the world not on their sleeves, but in the hollow spaces between their words. There is a subtle numbness in them, a muted reverberation of emotions that have nowhere to escape. It is not the loud despair of anger, nor the pointed edge of sorrow. It is softer, quieter, a persistent silence that folds over their heart like a gentle fog. No one sees the tiny fissures that form when small disappointments pile upon one another. No one notices how their smiles are carefully measured, their sighs swallowed, their frustrations quietly rerouted inward. They are not absent because they do not feel. They are absent because the act of sharing might fracture the fragile calm they maintain, and so they carry, they endure, and they conceal. There is a universality to this quiet suffering. Somewhere, at some time, everyone has felt the pull to remain silent, to contain the tremor of discomfort within the confines of their own chest. And yet, in the stillness of these restrained souls, there is a strange resilience. They have learned to navigate life without complaint, to soften the sharp edges of reality through silent endurance. But what is hidden beneath this still surface? What happens when the mind and heart are muted for too long? This story is not about fixing them. It is about seeing them, understanding the layers of their hidden numbness, and tracing the quiet path between silence, resilience, and the tender fractures of human emotion. Chapter 1: Silent Recognition. There are people whose presence is felt not through what they say, but through the spaces they leave behind. Their silence is not emptiness, but a kind of quiet gravity, a weight that shapes the rhythm of a room. They move through life with a careful equilibrium, their emotions folded neatly, like letters kept in a drawer, unseen yet always there. To the outside world, they appear calm, even serene, but beneath the surface lies a muted spectrum of feeling, carefully restrained. It begins in ordinary moments: the unspoken disappointment when plans fall apart, the swallowed frustration in conversations, the gentle sadness that drifts through a quiet morning. They notice everything, yet speak little. They absorb tension without complaint, observe conflict without interjecting, and watch hurtful words pass without retaliation. Their restraint is not born of weakness, but of a careful decision to protect themselves and others from the friction of raw emotion. Yet this constant moderation carries its own cost. Over time, the emotional currents that are never voiced begin to flatten, smoothing the peaks and valleys of feeling into a muted plain. Joy becomes quieter, anger less sharp, grief more distant. Their world is a softly filtered version of life, where feelings are acknowledged internally but rarely expressed externally. Still, there is an unmistakable presence in their silence, a subtle insistence that life be observed carefully, without the clamor of complaint. They are both part of the flow and set apart from it, guardians of a quiet resilience that few can understand. Recognizing them is not simply about noticing their restraint. It is about seeing the intricate architecture of their inner life, the careful balance between feeling and withholding, the artistry of endurance, and the hidden depths of those who navigate life without a single audible complaint. In their silence, there is a story waiting to be understood, a story that begins not with words, but with noticing. Chapter 2: Roots of Quiet. The quietness of those who never complain is rarely born in isolation. It often begins in the earliest chapters of life, shaped by the subtle lessons of home, family, and society. From childhood, they may learn that emotions are to be contained, that anger is dangerous, sorrow is inconvenient, and frustration burdens others. Complaining becomes a silent act of rebellion, discouraged by subtle glances, withheld affection, or unspoken expectations. In some homes, silence is taught as a shield. Children observe the tension in raised voices or the disappointment in a parent's weary sigh, and quickly adapt. They learn to anticipate consequences not through explicit instruction, but through lived experience. Speaking up might disrupt harmony, invite criticism, or reveal a vulnerability deemed unsafe. Over time, suppression becomes habitual, a reflexive way to navigate the world while maintaining connection and acceptance. Society compounds this lesson. There are invisible scripts, norms that value endurance over expression, patience over protest. Complaining is framed as weakness, and resilience is praised in the quiet, unremarkable survival of daily life. Praise is given for keeping composure, for handling it like a grown-up, while the inner world, the subtle tremors of disappointment, exhaustion, or longing, is left unacknowledged. The result is an intricate architecture of restraint. Every silent nod, every swallowed objection, every unspoken fear, is rooted in these early experiences. They are not passive victims of circumstance. They are adaptive, resilient, and sensitive, learning to calibrate their inner life against the expectations of those around them. Yet this adaptation carries a hidden cost. The very skill that protects them from conflict also dims the vibrancy of their emotions, creating a subtle, persistent numbness. Understanding these roots does not offer judgment. It offers context, a glimpse into the hidden scaffolding that supports their silence. Behind the calm exterior lies a lifetime of careful training, a mind shaped by subtle rules, and a heart that has learned to hold itself gently, quietly, without complaint. Chapter 3: The Science of Numbness. Beneath the surface of silence lies a subtle neurological and psychological reality. The brain does not distinguish between expressed and suppressed emotion. It registers stress, disappointment, and frustration just the same, even when no word is spoken. Over time, repeated emotional suppression alters the very wiring of the mind, quieting the peaks of intensity and flattening the valleys of response. This is how numbness takes root, not as a conscious choice, but as a physiological adaptation. Studies in psychology suggest that habitual suppression increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self-control, while reducing activation in the amygdala, the center of emotional response. In other words, their minds learn to keep emotion in check, dampening reactions that might otherwise surface. This adaptation can serve them well in moments of social tension, allowing them to maintain composure, avoid conflict, and navigate complex interpersonal landscapes. Yet the cost is subtle and cumulative. Emotions, when consistently unexpressed, begin to lose their vibrancy. Joy feels muted, sadness distant, and anger faintly familiar yet strangely foreign. Physiological consequences also follow. Tension builds in muscles, sleep becomes fragmented, and a quiet fatigue seeps into the body. The mind and body carry the weight of feelings that are never spoken aloud, manifesting in ways both noticeable and imperceptible. Numbness, in this sense, is a protective mechanism, an elegant, if imperfect, shield. It allows them to survive, to endure, to move through life without drawing unwanted attention or burdening others. And yet, it also distances them from the fullness of experience. Life's textures, its sharp edges, its warmth, its sorrow, its fleeting joys, are all softened, filtered through the lens of restraint. Understanding the science behind this quiet suffering does not seek to pathologize. It offers insight into a lived experience that often goes unseen. The numbness of those who never complain is not absence, but a recalibration, a delicate balancing act between survival and sensation, between endurance and the quiet erosion of feeling. Chapter 4: Inner Conflict and Resistance. Within the stillness of those who never complain, a subtle turbulence often goes unnoticed. Outwardly, they appear composed, almost untouchable. But beneath that calm surface, emotions swirl quietly, sometimes colliding, sometimes retreating into shadow. The very act of holding back creates a tension that is both protective and burdensome, a constant negotiation between the impulse to express and the habit of restraint. This inner conflict is rarely dramatic. It does not always erupt in moments of explosive anger or visible despair. Instead, it manifests in small, intimate ways, a tightening in the chest when disappointment lingers, a restless thought that circles the mind, a muted longing that never finds words. Resistance becomes a private dialogue, a negotiation with themselves. Should this feeling be acknowledged, or does speaking it risk disapproval, inconvenience, or emotional exposure? They often become skilled at redirecting these currents inward. Frustration might transform into self-criticism. Sadness might become a quiet withdrawal. Even joy is moderated, as if too much exuberance could disrupt the careful equilibrium they maintain. In this negotiation, the heart learns to whisper while the mind insists on silence. And yet, There is a quiet resilience embedded within this conflict. Their restraint is not mere suppression, it is a form of mastery over vulnerability. They navigate relationships and responsibilities with a grace born of discipline, often absorbing tension that others cannot bear. Their silence becomes both shield and mirror. It reflects their sensitivity, their awareness, and their capacity for endurance. But mastery has a shadow. The more they resist expression, the more distant the emotional landscape becomes, until even the self feels like a stranger. The inner dialogue, once a simple negotiation, grows into a labyrinth. Emotions are catalogued, measured, and sometimes forgotten, leaving the heart both guarded and quietly weary. This chapter of their life is rarely observed. It is intimate, invisible, yet profoundly human, a testament to the delicate struggle between feeling and the restraint that has defined them. Chapter 5: Moment of Realization. Even the quietest among us encounter moments when the weight of silence can no longer be ignored. It is rarely sudden or dramatic. Often, it arrives as a subtle awareness, a pang of disconnection in the middle of a conversation, a lingering emptiness after a small joy, or the faint echo of emotions that feel strangely muted. For those who never complain, this realization is a quiet turning point, an awakening to the cost of long-held restraint. In these moments, they see themselves reflected not just in the eyes of others, but in the unspoken spaces they inhabit. They notice how much of life has passed filtered, softened, or deferred, and how their own feelings have been catalogued but seldom expressed. There is a gentle shock in recognizing the quiet erosion of vitality that comes from never allowing the self to fully surface. Sometimes the realization is sparked by another's words, a casual question, an empathetic glance, or a moment of shared vulnerability that exposes the gap between what they feel and what they have allowed themselves to acknowledge. Other times, it emerges internally, as they sense the muted hum of their own heart, a subtle signal that something essential has been tucked away too long. This awakening does not immediately dissolve the patterns of suppression. It is not an instant liberation, but a soft, introspective recognition, a turning of the gaze inward with gentle curiosity. They begin to observe the habits, the learned responses, and the quiet strategies that have protected them for so long, while also understanding how these same strategies have created distance from their own emotions. The moment of realization is both fragile and profound. It carries no blame, no urgency, only the quiet invitation to notice. In this space, the possibility of change begins, not as a task, but as an awareness, a recognition that the hidden numbness they have carried is not who they are, but what they have learned to endure. And in that recognition there is the first breath of something softer, something willing to feel. Chapter 6: Healing in Stillness. Healing for those who have never complained is rarely loud. It does not come as a dramatic breakthrough or an outward display. It arrives slowly, like dawn creeping through a quiet room, in moments of reflection, acknowledgement, and gentle self-compassion. It is a process of reclaiming the emotions that were carefully tucked away, learning to inhabit the full spectrum of feeling without fear or judgment. The first steps are often subtle. A pause before responding, a quiet acknowledgement of sadness or frustration, a willingness to notice longing or disappointment without immediately redirecting it inward. In these moments, the heart remembers the sensations it once softened, the tension that had been held for years, and allows itself the space to exist. Each small recognition is a crack in the wall of numbness, a gentle invitation for life to flow more fully through the self. Therapeutic practices, mindfulness, or simply attentive observation can provide mirrors for these long-hidden emotions. They do not demand expression, only presence. The act of naming a feeling, or even noticing it, begins to dissolve the accumulated weight of restraint. The body, long accustomed to carrying the unspoken, begins to release its subtle tension, shoulders unclench, breath deepens, and the faint vibrancy of life seeps back into places that had grown muted. Healing in stillness also teaches balance. It honors the resilience built through years of careful endurance, recognizing that the silence which once protected is not wholly wrong, it is part of who they are. Integration does not erase their history of restraint, it reframes it, allowing them to move with awareness rather than habit. In this quiet reclamation, the numbness softens. Emotions regain texture and depth. Moments of joy sparkle more vividly, grief can be felt without being overwhelming, and even anger finds a measured place within the heart. Healing is not loud. It is the soft, deliberate return to oneself, the careful listening to the whispers of a long-muted heart, and the gentle unfolding of life once contained by silence. Chapter 7: Poetic Reflection. In the quiet lives of those who never complain, there is a hidden poetry, written not in words but in restraint, observation, and endurance. Their hearts have learned a delicate language of subtlety, a way of feeling deeply while moving softly through the world. Every unspoken sorrow, every tempered joy, every muted frustration is a stroke on the canvas of their existence, creating a picture that few truly see, yet one that is rich in texture and depth. Their silence is not absence. It is presence, measured and deliberate. It is the hum of empathy that absorbs the discord of others, the gentle witness to life's turbulence, the quiet gravity that holds together fragile spaces. In this silence, there is an intelligence, a sensitivity, a capacity to feel without demanding recognition. It is a rare kind of resilience, one that can carry both beauty and burden. And yet, even in their stillness, there is a longing for acknowledgement, for understanding, for the subtle permission to simply be. The quiet numbness they have carried is not a failure, but a shield, and as it softens through awareness and gentle healing, it reveals the tenderness that has always been there, waiting to be seen. To witness them is to learn a profound truth about human emotion, that strength is not always loud, that endurance is often invisible, and that depth can reside in the places where words are few. There is a fragile elegance in their existence, a reminder that life's texture is not only in the storms, but in the silent moments that pass almost unnoticed. In the end, the story of those who never complain is a meditation on subtlety and resilience. It invites us to pause, to observe without judgment, and to recognize the quiet courage in simply being. For within their silence lies a luminous humanity, a reminder that even in stillness, the heart continues to feel, and the soul quietly endures.